Hello, everyone, and welcome to Here Together, a show about digital events and how we can be physically separated yet digitally here together. Today, we have a great episode with Adam Parry, who is Event Tech News, Event Tech Live. He does just an amazing assortment of things. I'm really interested to chat with him today about the upcoming US Event Tech Live. And so, without further ado, let's have Adam join us.
Hi, Joe, and thanks for having me on. And I think that's my first audio cue of ever being introduced on a show like this. So thanks for that.
Yeah, beautiful. Yeah, I mean, you do some amazing things, and you've been at this. You're not a spring chicken to digital and tech for events. Is that fair to
No,
say?
that's yeah, that is very fair to say. Probably yeah. So I I started out in events well over 15 years ago. Kind of fell into event organizing. I think just like everybody else, I think that's the true definition of the meaning. I fell into it. But my passion is just technology in general, right? So I'm a big first adopter. I'm always on the beta releases of iOS, and I just love innovation. But my day-to-day job led me to write about how events were being produced and delivered and managed. And inherently, I kind of just went down that tech funnel because it was where my interest was, and I wanted to see what tech was doing from a Avery production point of view, where the challenges were, and really just find out more about tech. So we started really focusing on kind of niching out in tech probably about a decade ago, which led us on to organize the events that we do and things like that. And then, I just still really love it, and hopefully help people kind of learn a little something that they can implement themselves into their event business that makes that difference.
Awesome. So I have to ask, since I'm in the U.S., you are expanding. This will be your first U.S. and Canadian,
It will be, yeah. Yeah, that's right. Yeah.
and is that going to be fully in person, virtual, hybrid? Like, what's the model?
Sure. So Event Tech Live, UK and Europe, as we now refer to it, it was just Event Tech Live before, has always been a physical event. However, I think, through great partnerships and great suppliers that we work with, we've always been able to have an element of a hybrid event as part of Event Tech Live. We've always streamed content from the event, we've always made it available online, and we've always captured that content and provided it in an on-demand way as means as well. It just wasn't wrapped up into what I guess everybody's using at the moment, which are these kind of virtual event technology solutions, right? But we were moving that way. And we were moving that way. Probably our plan to really implement what everybody's been implementing over the last year was probably a year or two away. One of the great things about event tech, though, is it's an international topic, and very much so has been over the last 12 months. We have customers here in the UK who are founded here in the UK or Europe that are, have done great jobs in kind of moving overseas and kind of setting up in North America in different locations. And vice versa, we have a lot of customers who come to Event Tech Live in the UK from the US because they're expanding across Europe, and it's a great kind of central location from us. But what both our audience in terms of attendees and network of people and our customers have been saying to us for a number of years is the format of what we do at Event Tech Live, being so laser focused on the subject matter, really works for them because they know that everybody in the room is switched onto that topic. It's not an afterthought or well, let's just see what's cool in tech. They're there literally for that topic and that topic alone. So the engagement rates, the conversations are much higher quality and things like that. And we've been asked for a number of years to replicate what we're doing in various locations around the world. And I think for us, the North American market just made so much more sense because we've already got a good network there. We've already got an audience there. It's an English speaking first country, so that makes it easy as well on us from a production point of view. And again, our plans were to, I think, probably, if I'm in all honesty, have a physical event first over the next couple of years. But what the pandemic taught us is virtual events are a great way to launch into new regions very safely, very cost efficiently. Um, for everybody involved, that's including attendees, right? Because they don't have to necessarily get a plane, get a train, automobile, hotel rooms and all that kind of stuff to still access the event and get value from it. So I guess when we launched Event Tech Live US and Canada, it was very much still a world of lockdown. And we felt the safest and most convenient thing for everybody involved to do was launch it as a fully virtual event. But I think it's fair to say that it's an event industry event. So the aim is to bring people together in the same room because there's still so much value there. And ultimately, all our events will be hybrid going forward. We just need to take time to kind of build up.
Oh, wow.
The biggest question for us is like, where in the US do we actually hold a physical event? So hopefully we'll be able to figure that out.
Yeah, yeah. Well, you're coming in the hottest portion of the year in the U.S., so I hope there's plenty of AC and beverages. uh, you know, I'd like to go back to kind of the original event and figure out kind of where that kind of leads into for the U.S. because, in all fairness and honesty, for anyone who's watching, I've gone back and watched several years of their startup competition videos, and I find that fascinating. Right? It's when you look at 2016, 2017, maybe 2018, and then you think about how much things have changed. And it actually kind of almost leads into a conversation that I had with a colleague the other day who said, everyone who says that they're an event tech specialist or an event tech evangelist or whatever moniker you place on yourself, should we all relook at our titles? Because now does it need to be digital event tech evangelist or, it seems like even looking at the technology that was coming out 2 years ago, it was still very much in the vein of having an app on a phone for an in-person event. And they seem like they're not diametrically opposed, but there's definitely a shift in what people refer to and look at as technology, I think. And so I would love to know kind of, are you seeing new trends, especially in the startup portion of those events? Because I just feel like there's been a giant swell of shift and new technologies coming out. Some of them probably won't make it, but I would just love to know what you're seeing so far.
Yeah, sure. It's really interesting. And event apps is a great kind of topic and subject matter to start off with because, 10 years ago, that was the hot new thing, right? It was the thing that there seemed to be lots of companies producing or existing companies now being able to offer this technology to the events industry. And I think that somewhat was on the back of the rise of apps just in general. Apps were becoming more and more the daily use of our lives. So they got the audience kind of acquisition thing relatively down quite easily. And we were trying to replace things like show brochures and things like that. We were trying to get into the hands and pockets of our attendees to varying degrees of success as well, if we're totally honest about it. And that was, I think, what happens with all tech is when people see a small or slight amount of success, they also want to compete in that arena and they want to leverage those opportunities to do business and provide technology and things like that. And the event tech space is extremely competitive. And it's extremely dynamic because there's so many different types of events that you can supply to. And lots of these technology companies that have come out with virtual event platforms over the last 12 months have had existing relationships trusted to supply them with the technology. So I think why we see now, I think the last count I tracked over 300 virtual event platforms that are on offer. Some of that has come out from an existing relationship and a desire to say, hey, you used to do this with us on our physical event. Can you do this with us on our virtual event? But what's interesting to me is, and it's kind of like Zoom, right? Like Zoom is this core technology product, and now there's all of these things that kind of bolt into Zoom in
Yeah.
order to allow you to do other things. And that's what seems to be the trend with event tech at the moment. I'm starting to see lots of technologies that can amplify what you're doing and do other things on top of your virtual event platform. So a great example of this, I'll give them a shout out, is this company called Hire. What they're coming at technology from is it's essentially your attendee profile that follows you around to events and also to media websites and things like that. So you kind of you continually keep that conversation going. But as you land on a new event website, if they're using Hire, then you can see and connect up with the attendees there. If you move on to the next event and they're using Hire, it's those attendees and things there. but you don't lose that communication with those connections that you've made at either event just because that event's not happening anymore or it's kind of closed and gone off. And I think that's a really interesting way, because my understanding is, or the research that we're doing kind of shows that the first place everybody goes post event, a virtual event, is LinkedIn, to kind of
Yeah.
continue that conversation and stuff. And then there's just some of the crazy, there's things like AI translation that's kind of really coming into the mainstream now, because then anybody anywhere in the world can kind of engage in their first or preferred language. There's some really interesting stuff, but I think we'll just, after virtual events, I'm sure there'll be another wave of something else coming in, which is just as popular. And then all of a sudden there'll be, a dozen or more companies pop up doing that as well.
Yeah. Yeah. And, well, and I think to your point, with, things kind of bolting into one another or whatever, this Lego block approach, I wonder if some of it's not going to lead to consolidation in the next,
Mm.
2 to 3 years. I think hopping with StreamYard is a perfect example of that. We can do a lot of things really great, or we can do a lot of things really quickly, or we can buy somebody who already does it great. Um, and I just, yeah, I do wonder how much stock you should put in any one solution, knowing what's going on in the market. And then there's just all these crazy valuations, and it's nuts.
Yeah.
Are you
Yeah. No.
seeing? Um, are you seeing? I think the one that you spoke about is more in lines with building community, kind of post event almost to some degree. Are you
Mhm.
seeing more on that end? Because that seems to be a missing piece. Like events have been one and done, and how do you keep that going all year long?
Yeah. It's an interesting question, and there seems to be somewhat of a divergence with the way the different platforms are going with this approach to community. And some are not even really going down that route. They're going more after what I would class as marketplace. So this is about consumerism, it's about business deals, it's about lead generation and things like that. So I think Amazon rather than community. Like Amazon's got a huge community almost, but nobody really interacts with each other other than just Amazon, right? So there are some kind of event tech platforms that are going down this route of the value to that organizer is to bring more business to their customers, therefore leveraging more value. And the more there is to do on that platform or that event platform in terms of purchasing or research or things like that, then just you'll naturally drive the engagement through the attendees and maybe some on-demand content. There are others that like Swapcard that are going straight after the community play, and as far as they can see it, as far as they see it, sorry, the attendees and the community are the lifeblood of event, and that's the long-term play. And they're building infrastructure to allow event organizers and planners to foster that community 365 days a year. And then there are others. Another one would be a company called Grip, who don't really see it as their role to foster or have the infrastructure for community, but they do see themselves as that all-purpose venue to allow the community to come together for whatever type of event activity that organizer is producing at that point. So maybe it's a webinar, maybe it's a lunch and learn, maybe it's a town hall, maybe it's a large event with 30, 40,000 people. They're the multifaceted venue, and then they're going to leave the organizer to choose another means at bringing that community together 365 days a year, because there are some great already existing community platforms out there, and some people already maybe have their community on Facebook and a Facebook group or something like that. So I think there's a number of different ways people are trying to approach this idea of where they sit in that community play.
Interesting. Yeah, I mean, that is a very interesting, kind of divergent path there. I do wonder, as this goes on, as we go back to whatever the new normal is, or whatever term you choose to use, uh, for Event Tech Live and
Mhm.
for events like that, do you think, one day you're going to have an on-site hall, a hybrid hall, and a digital hall, or how do you think they're going to continue to kind of play together in one machination, or do you think they're going to be breakouts?
Yeah, again, I think there's a number of different approaches to what a hybrid event might look like, and I also think that also depends very much on where the focus is for your event. So I think let's take conferences for a moment. Content, very heavily content led,
Mhm.
individual ticket purchasing, they're going to be simultaneous events, so that they're happening at the same time, both physically or digitally, because that makes sense. The content's relevant at the same time. People can communicate through desktop and mobile apps and that kind of stuff if they want to. And I honestly think those, although there's huge amounts of value about in meeting people and building networks and relationships at those events, actually in that content-led strategy, it's less about actually connecting between a digital and a physical person, and kind of overcoming those challenges. In the exhibition world, I think there is a true challenge there around how those events sit together at the same time, because there is so much focus on that activity being in person and people sitting down together on exhibition stands at trade shows in other locations and having meaningful conversations about the business that they're there to conduct. And those environments are just so naturally vibrant in terms of atmosphere that to have somebody remotely connected with somebody physically, there's a huge amount of challenges there. You know, there's only one way to really do it, and that's have a huge amount of infrastructure in place, that like pods and domes and all that kind of stuff that allow that to take place. But then that still means that you're taking somebody away from maybe the trade show floor where they've got passing traffic. So there's other challenges there, or maybe they have to bring extra people in to man the staff. So that means extra costs and that kind of stuff. If I'm honestly looking at trade shows, I think most will do what's called like or we refer to as a sequential event. So they'll do digital pre, they'll focus on the physical, and then they maybe do some digital post, or they'll do some digital in the lead up to the physical event to build anticipation and hype, and kind of as a reg drive and part of the marketing of the event. And then again, just focus on the physical, with the content recorded there and placed on demand for a post event digital scheme. So it really depends on what type of event you're doing. What I can tell you, what we're doing is we're essentially having 2 days of digital lead into the 2 days of physical, and a post day of digital wrap up. We're personally not going to close the doors on people connecting physically and remotely on the physical days, because it's our job to test these things. It's our job to kind of push the boundaries of what can be done and actually feed that back to the sector. So we're going to take that risk of going, let's open the doors and see what happens. And if it works, it works. If it doesn't, then we know for next time. But yeah, I think there's a number of different strategies people will take, purely depending on what the value is to the audience at that moment in time.
Interesting. Interesting. So, thinking about that, we've spoken a little bit about startup competition, something that you've done really well. We've spoken about where apps and other technologies are headed. How long until we see a "Where Are They Now" kind of section of Event Tech Live? And I, I I looked
A
at some of those.
graveyard.
Well, I looked at some of those platforms, and some of them are some of the competitors for the startup, uh, and some of them had not as great UI. Some of them had some really interesting underlying technology. Some of them, I think, back in 2016, were already looking at using some form or version of AI to do some really smart things. And I can't find all of them now, and so I'm presuming that they've merged or gotten a better name or some branding or whatever the case may be. But you know, I would love to just kind of know, like, have you seen any of them that have gone through this process and like kind of standouts that were just kind of little twinkles in someone's eye, 5, 10 years ago?
Yeah, unfortunately, I have to say that's the case right across the board. The events industry is extremely difficult, I think, to grow quickly in, which many startups rely on. Right? They rely on a certain amount of grit and determination from the founders to get going. Maybe some family injection and cash, then some seed rounds, some founders founding money, and maybe they go on to raise higher levels of investment, which allows them to grow. And many technology companies inherently burn through cash really, really quickly, and need huge amounts of money, both for development, sales, marketing, operations, and such. Um, and Hopin, I'm not going to lie, I think they were at the right time with the right level of investment. There was not much else to invest in at the time. So investors were still looking for return on that cash. They didn't want to sit on it. And Hopin was right there at the gates with open hands, and bravo to them, because I think they've done a fantastic job with that money and with that since. That's nothing to be ashamed of. But other companies and events also run in yearly or biannual cycles. So when you're selling into a company, you're selling in one chunk or one hit, and it's very hard to leverage monthly, annual, recurring revenue from event organizers, unless it's for a small amount of money, because they're kind of like, well, I'm not using this technology, so why do I ever need to pay for it right now? Can I just not switch it on like a month out from my event? So that makes it difficult as well for those companies to get a steady influx of cash that then, investors are kind of going, okay, yeah, we can see the annual recurring revenue grow, and we're going to invest our money. They're like, what do you mean? It's like once every 12 months you get a contract. So that's a big challenge. And then for startups, there's also this other challenge of there are better and more well-funded companies who can look at a technology quite quickly, and if they think they've got something, then they can develop that probably quicker and take it to market and challenge them quite head on. And I think a great example of that is, let's take Swapcard. They saw Clubhouse, they saw how popular it was becoming, and they developed a Clubhouse-esque platform within their own platform within a matter of months, I think realistically, maybe even weeks. So, if you were a startup and not as well funded or put in the spotlight as Clubhouse, all of a sudden you'd have a company that's kind of quashed you with just a very challenging, and a much wider gamut of technology that they can offer you. So yeah, those are some of the reasons I think we've seen technology companies come in and not make it as well as in other sectors.
Yeah, yeah, and those are good points. Especially the speed at which things are moving right now. So I have to ask you. I've been looking at your site.
Yep.
What is the most exciting thing, if I'm in the U.S., that I should be looking forward to for this conference?
I think our agenda, in all honesty, we launched Event Tech Live, US and Canada, as a virtual 2-day event, and we've had huge amounts of kind of content submitted to us from technology providers, from event organizers, event planners, people actually utilizing this technology. That actually led us very recently to add an additional day of content, because there was just so much gold in there that we really couldn't afford to just say, no, we're not doing this. And that kind of goes to our core and our root, because me and my co-founder, we both came from print publishing, and the biggest challenge with print publishing is if there's not enough ad revenue, you can't add more content into there. So some of that great content kind of just doesn't get any visibility. And we launched Event Industry News, our media publication, on the basis that it gave us an unlimited amount of opportunity to publish information which people can then decide for them if it's relevant or of value. So it's the agenda, it's the content. We've got not only some great speakers, some great panels, Scott Wilcox from South by Southwest. We've got people from Thomson Reuters. We've got Informa. I think we've got probably content and individuals that represent every element of our sector kind of coming together to talk about different aspects of technology. And then what we've also introduced this time round since our last event is those more face-to-face, more community-led kind of content pieces. So workshops, roundtables, speed networking. That was something that our audience on both sides fed back to us, that watching content is fine, but it's very passive, and our industry is about meeting and greeting and connecting up with people. So the workshop, speed networking, and roundtables, we've already got pretty much all of them oversubscribed for attendance. So I don't know what we're going to do there. It's a case of a first come, first serve scenario. But that's some of the content I think is going to be really valuable to people.
Interesting. So, so you think that's going to be a long-term trend? More roundtables, more speed networking, more interaction, I guess?
I do. Yeah, I do. And I think that's where the value is. I think people want engagement. They want to be participants not just attendees, right? They want, and I think that let's look at Clubhouse, right? There's no video, there's no picture aspect, there's no streamed content on Clubhouse, but it's so popular because everybody can have the opportunity to have a voice and be involved in that conversation. And I think we really need to take notice of that as event organizers. I think gone are the days of just having, one track of content or two tracks of content, which is just session, 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 session. And I don't care what anybody says, no amount of Q&A, polling, or platform chat replaces human conversation. They're great tools. They augment the experience. They allow people to have a voice if they're not confident on screen. But I can tell you already from the short time that our registration's been open, the amount of people that have added themselves pre-event to these sessions, the proof's in the data. And I think going forward, where it's not necessarily about learning as an active participanty role, as organizers, I think if we can craft these moments in time digitally to bring people together, I think that's where the real value is. I think that's where we'll see visitor and attendee satisfaction go right up. And I can't remember anybody saying about Zoom fatigue when they're on a Zoom with a bunch of their mates having a drink and chatting about, something that they're interested in. It always seems to refer to that, like, I'm very passive, I'm not actively engaged, I'm just watching this content. I think that's where Zoom fatigue really comes from. So yeah, I think we're going to see a huge trend that way.
Yeah, I've got a colleague who says it's not Zoom fatigue; it's bad meeting fatigue.
Yeah.
Yeah. So, yeah, I mean that's a splendid thing. Once things really go hybrid and that kicks off, um, you then see potentially for Event Tech Live at least, would the roundtables be a mix of in person and digital attendees, or still sorting through that, or?
It's a really good, if you were to put me on the spot right now and ask me how does a roundtable work in a hybrid environment, my honest gut would tell me to replicate that twice, one in a physical setting and one in a virtual setting, to allow those people to connect on the same level. Because there's just going to be inherently technical issues, sound, lighting, camera positions, all this kind of stuff. Like how does that work in an environment where you have got 10, 12 people around the round table? Like, that's just a technical nightmare, right? That's, how do you even produce that? So that would be my gut instinct. I would double up on those sessions, run them once for in person and run them once digitally. And kind of just make that investment in that sense, from an event production point of view.
I totally agree. I've been telling people that, and people think I'm nuts. I'm like, if I go to an event in person, it's because I really wanted to be there. If I paid $1,000 or whatever for accommodations and travel, so I can't imagine spending it on my phone trying to have a digital hybrid roundtable. So yeah, I think that's a very solid point. I think I'm really interested to not to pick on one technology in particular, but those Slido kind of things, how they play out. Do they have a place? Certainly, maybe for Q&A sessions, after a large stage event. But yeah, I'm interested to see how it'll play out and what hybrid really looks like. And a roundtable, I selected that one because I've been struggling with this too. People for workshops and roundtables, you can use a tool like Mural or Miro or one of those, but how far will it actually carry you, and will it actually in the end inhibit the on-site interactions?
And I think we also have to decide from a content perspective, where does that content best sit to get the most interaction, right? Roundtables at physical events can be amazing things, bringing people together around the same topic. But at a physical event, there are also generally so much other opportunity around there that, let's be honest, not all roundtables and workshops at physical events are always super well attended. They might get the level of interest initially, but then, is somebody just not watching the time and they're chatting at the bar with somebody or they on somebody else's stand and things like that. I'm really interested to see when it comes to hybrid events, how much content is actually now at the physical event. Are we going to see a reduction in content and a more focus on people meeting and actually spending time together, having conversations in both a business environment and just a general relationship environment? Because I can see it going that way. Because and for anybody in AV and staging and stuff, please don't send hate mail to my house. But I can honestly see that some of the cost of hybrid being offset by a reduction in stage costs at the physical event, right?
Yeah.
Like if I'm now producing all of this extra content online, can I do one or two less stages at the physical event because I don't need as much physical content to draw that audience in, and I can focus them more on meetings and connections and networking.
Yeah. I mean, I think that's a really valuable point. Um, and, you know, the secondary point is how can you bring in enough internet capacity at some of these venues, especially some of the older ones. You know, you're trucking it in, right? And unlike a live broadcast where it's a one-way communication, the real challenge I think for AV going into this new environment is going to be now you have to take a return, or you have to take 50 returns, or you know whatever it looks like for that venue. So yeah, I do think there'll be less stages, or I think. Do you think perhaps there'll be more kind of hub and spoke? Will there be more disparate locations and you know talent happening off site?
I do. I think there's been some amazing examples of that already. So there was an event, SME Rush or SEM Rush. I always get that wrong. They're a technology provider, help people with SEO and search, right? They have a huge community, but it's ultimately spread all around the world. It's not in one location. And they've done physical events together, bringing together their top 250 customers or something, doing one of these retreats, content, networking, all that kind of stuff. But it's the top 1% of their customers, right? Because it needs a level of spend for them to be able to justify that. And I think everybody in business can understand that. But what that means is there was a huge amount of their community that never got to participate in those events. So what they actually did, and this was before the pandemic, this was back in 2019, they had a hub and spoke model, but it was a relay. So I think they started off in somewhere like Singapore, and then they went to the Middle East, and then they went to London in the UK, and then they went to New York, and then they went to LA. So what they essentially did was have like a full, I can't remember if it was 24 hours, but it was a long, long time stream of content. And it started off in one location and moved along so people could participate in their region, in their time zone, still get access to the other content and the other attendees, but then still come together within their region. And I think that's actually really valuable because although there's huge amounts of value going to international events and connecting it with people that are just in totally different regions to you, where most people's network and business opportunities are actually probably within a 50 to 100-mile radius of where they're actually located because of logistics around actually doing business.
Yeah.
And I think that's probably a great way to go. So maybe some entrepreneurs, maybe some big event companies out there are already kind of going down that road of going, like, we have this one mega event, but maybe we have a number of series of locations, and that makes it more cost effective for our attendees. Speakers and content can be again in their first or chosen language. Sponsors can be localized. So there's probably so much value around that. I think that the challenge is how do they connect all of that up, right? How do they make it meaningful for people to connect no matter where they are?
It's a project manager's dream or nightmare or both.
Probably the latter.
Oh man, yeah. I mean, it will be an interesting challenge. And just thinking through like the connectivity of it all, right? Like low latency delays. Gosh, you know, there was a gosh, where was it? One of the um, one country on the African continent shut down the internet for a week recently, a few months ago, right around an election, which I thought was interesting. And so nobody knew until it was coming up. The government decides to shut down their internet. Yeah, I think Plan Bs are going to be very different in this new world.
Yeah, and I think Interestingly about hub and spoke and connectivity and infrastructure and things like that, I think that actually comes back to community again.
Yeah.
Because I think as unless you are a big, huge company, I think as smaller independent planners, you're really going to rely on actually having partnerships with people in those regions. So maybe that is a sponsor, maybe that's just one of your speakers, maybe that's a company that's exhibited at your event again. Is there a business relationship to be formed where it says like, hey, you want to do an event in your region, you're working with us as a partner in order to be able to do that under our brand. The value is there that you invest some money, some time, and some infrastructure in delivering a event tech live local, for example, or something like that. So they get a huge amount of value out of it. We get an extension of the brand, for example, and we can all work together with our experience and our knowledge in bringing that community together under that brand for that person there. I think that has to be the way that these hub and spoke events will go, because for one organization to try and run everything themselves is, like you said, it's just going to be a logistical project management nightmare. And you need people on the ground, I think, when it comes to physical events.
Yeah. I think, man, distributed teams and distributed systems. We all have a lot to learn from digital nomads for sure,
Mm.
and how that works. Um, you I know we've been speaking for a while, so I want to ask you one or two last questions, and not take too much of your time. But I would love to know, number one, thinking about everything that we've spoken about, and everything that you see coming up for this new event that's now 3 days. Um, if you were going to start a new technology right now, what would it be?
Oh, that's a good question. Um, One or two of my friends are already doing it. So I think there's some basic kind of event technology stuff that we really need to fix. And um, first and foremost, I think that's the registration process, right? I think the registration process is really archaic. It's old. It's antiquated. And honestly, I'm not even sure, as an event organizer, I'm not even sure of the quality or accuracy of what's being input, because people just want to get through registration, right? They understand they're getting buyer intent questions and they're going to go into the sales brochure and all that kind of stuff. But like, there's got to be a better way to understand who our audience is that gives us better quality data and a faster, unique experience. I'm almost thinking like that checkout now button on Amazon. Like, you don't even have to go, you don't even have to select your card. It just, it's the default, boom, done. I want it. Let's go. Like, why are we not there with events in terms of technology? Why are we not at the point where somebody can just one button click, register for it, get a ticket, and get on site? That seems like a really thing that should be sorted out.
Do
But
you think
second to
that's
that,
do
yeah,
you think
go
that's
go
for
for it.
all 300 platforms or just a few?
I think it has to be. I think it has to be maybe a separate technology company that works with platforms in order to leverage that. And it would be driven by the desire from the event organizer to say, hey, we're using your platform over here, but we want to use this solution to register attendees because it makes it so easy for them. Just as we've seen, do you want to log in with Google, LinkedIn, or Twitter? Like, this is the way that registration for events should be going, but those systems probably aren't going to work well for us as an event industry, so we maybe need to have our own thing. um, but going on from that, I'm a huge advocate for blockchain technology. Like, I'm a real, this is not just crypto, it's not just like DeFi and banking and finance and everybody making huge amounts of money over Dogecoin and all that kind of stuff, even though that's like super fun. It's the fundamentals of what blockchain technology is going to mean in terms of smart contracts, traceability, reporting, things like that. And one of those interesting areas is, what if we could flip the switch on the way that people access events? What if they got paid to access an event instead of buying a ticket for an event based on attention, based on like the Brave token, which allows me as a browser of the internet to get a share of the revenue that they get from advertisers, because it's a democratized economy rather than Google just showing me an ad and taking the lion's share of everything, and I don't get nothing just because I use Google, right?
Yeah.
Like, that's an interesting switch on there's a value to me over and above accessing great content because I'm also going to get paid if I'm a great participant, if I respond to sponsor requests and engage with sponsors and be an active part of the role, because I know that I'm going to get a cut, I'm going to get a check cut at the end of it from the organizer because I've been such a great participant and such high value for them. Like that to me is a great world to live in where I'm part of the economy as well as the participant. And I think there's other things that we can do with blockchain technology that will just open a huge amount of doors. Like one of the challenges around virtual events at the moment is if it's a virtual event where attendance has to be done in order to gain credits or, you know, an accreditation or keep your license or something like that, like what's to stop somebody just logging in and walking away? Like, okay, you could argue that tests and all that kind of stuff at the end, but the attention might not necessarily be there. So yeah, if it was me, I couldn't put my finger on it right now, but I believe that if there was one area worth exploring, it would be blockchain technology for our sector, because I think there's huge amounts of potential on data accessibility, revenue, community, all that kind of stuff. I mean, even just, sorry, I'm waffling on now, Joe. There will be at some point, I can guarantee you, some budding entrepreneur that launches an event that has sponsors and exhibitors that probably pay very little, if $0 up front. And there's a business relationship there, just like affiliate marketing, which says, hey, if we bring you an audience and you do business, then we get a percentage of that. And trust me, like if you look at affiliate marketing in other sectors, that is way, way bigger value and more revenue than you would ever be able to charge that sponsor or company for an individual activity, because their deals could be worth 100, 200,000, $1 million. If you're walking away with 10% of that, they probably would have never paid you that up front. But hey, if a business deal comes off and we can track that, maybe that's where blockchain technology comes in. Then there's no risk, there's just huge reward. But you know, maybe that's another opportunity as well.
Yeah, I mean that would be really interesting, especially, gosh, you know, affiliate marketing and partner associate programs kind of run the gamut. I just remember the last time Amazon dropped dropped down their percentage of pays. I told a friend who's really big into that. I was like, man, you're about to get hammered. He goes, why? I'm in the tech space. We get 2% and it's always, you know, $1,000 camera or whatever. And I said, yeah, but the percentage that you get off of furniture went down. He goes, what? I was like, yeah, look at the outdoor goods. And sure enough, 3 months earlier, because it was summer, he said somebody clicked one of his links and then bought, I think it was $5,000 worth of patio and pool furniture. And it went from 5% to 2. He goes, oh, that is going to hurt. I think figuring out what that metric is so that it's not that kind of scenario is probably going to be really key. Like what are those, how do those affiliate programs look? And like, do you keep those revenues or a percentage of them for the life of that customer? Like that would be a tremendously interesting model for any event.
Yeah, I think those are all things we'd have to figure out, Joe. And what actually your example there, although I totally believe that, and there's definitely a danger in that happening in an event environment. What's actually interesting to me is, as event organizers, your friend who's obviously pushing and promoting Amazon products for a relatively small fee, is there more value in me as an event organizer saying, hey Joe, come and work with me because I have the ideal out garden summer furniture show. Like come and work with me with your community and I'll give you 10%. Like, is that a better way to, because they become then part of, maybe not a speaker, but they're a part of the affiliate program, and working with me and the event organizers, we can attract those furniture companies. They make more money because there's direct sales to the customer and they own the customer data. Like anybody who sells anything through Amazon, you do not own that customer data. Amazon does.
Yeah.
And that's huge value as well. Like if we can take that business back away from Amazon and have the customer data between us, and it's a business relationship, then that value goes up through the roof, in my opinion.
Yeah. You know, speaking about technology, it would be interesting to comb through a lot of those affiliate programs and see what those kind of disparate purchases are. And see where some of those things really line up, or maybe there's a secondary or tertiary market that your audience really already is already keen to that you're just not aware of,
Hmm.
or you're not really
Yeah.
thinking about or tracking. Gosh, yeah, that's a lot to think about. Okay, okay, I could go on all day about that, but tell me, um, my last question would be: are there three books right now that you would suggest people doing digital events, getting into digital events, should read?
Oh wow. There are. Can I turn around for a second because I've
Sure,
got a
sure.
couple behind me. So one, and this one. Okay. So these are techie books, but I think there's a lot to be learned from technology at the moment in the way that we organize events, right? We are dealing with the same thing. Most technology platforms deal with an end user, and there's a program in which place to market to them, sell to them, and keep them as a customer. So I think there's a lot that we can learn there. Two of these books are from the same author, or one of the authors of both of these books is the same person. This is a great book, The Face of Digital. Um, this is by Marco Ghiberti and Jay Weintraub. I think I've butchered his name, so Jay, if I've done that, I really apologize. The Face of Digital was written quite a long time ago, actually now, but it was all about how social networks were affecting events back in the day. So I think this book is maybe 6 or more years old, maybe a little bit longer now. Um, but it's a really interesting insight from people within the events industry how digital was transforming events maybe even 6 or more years ago. So that's worth a look because that gives you a good kind of sense check of where things have how fastly things have changed. Second to that, Marco has just written a second book with a guy called Denzel Rankin from AMR on how we're now reinventing live events. Oh, I can't remember which way that is. There we go. And the always on future events, which very much talks about 365-day communities and bringing people together in moments in time, and how he doesn't say this in this book, but how maybe the traditional event business is no longer the traditional event business and how we need to think outside of just delivering events and more delivering value through content and other means of for your community and ultimately your customers and stuff. So that's a great one. Link in the bio. No, I'm joking. I haven't got a link in the bio. And this is another one. If you want to really understand from a technology point of view, platforms, then this book here, Platform Revolution, is a great read as well. And I will say this to anybody listening to this podcast or watching now, some of the best technology I've seen for the events industry have come from people that aren't technology people, they're event people. But what they've done is they've gone out and they've found a partner who can help them build the platforms and the technology that overcome the challenges of them in their roles. And that speaks volumes to me. When anybody ever comes to me and say, hey, I'm an event organizer by trade, but I've got this technology, my ears pick up because I go, right, you know what was missing from your job. You know what was lacking and where technology couldn't support you. You've now gone out of your way to build a tool to help you. And there's probably a million people out there just like you that that technology can help as well. And back to your point about startups, where I see companies coming from a technology standpoint, having no experience in the events industry, that's where they tend to fail real fast because they just don't understand the economics of events. So if you're thinking about launching event technology or scoping out, you think you've got something, Platform Revolution is a great book to kind of read to get you understanding of like what it means to build platforms and tech.
Interesting. And I'm amazed because when I watched you go to your shelf, the three that you needed were right there together. They were like your holy little trinity. Interesting.
There's a lot of other books in there that I won't mention because they're probably not. It's not right to mention them on air. But I can send you a list, Joe, of all the interesting books that I kind of come across from time to time.
I send them on. I would love them. Yeah, no, thank you so much for that, and thank you for your time. To anyone who's watched to the end, thank you. Consider subscribing if you're on YouTube, but definitely come over to LinkedIn to jfloyd.co and follow the page. We're trying to provide these as a service to the event industry. Obviously, Adam hasn't been paid. I haven't been paid. There's no affiliate marketing here. It's just we want to try and get the message out about the things that you need to know for digital events in particular, which seems to be still kind of a void. So thank you for watching. Please stay tuned. We'll have another one soon, and have a great day.